Welcome on stage, our moderator. We've got Kevin Lee of Gate.io and Yatsui, the co-founder and chairman of Animoca. You guys don't want to miss this one.
All right.
Kevin,
Testing. All right, we're good.
Works just fine. Yeah.
So I just told Yet at the backstage, I don't moderate that often. And this is the second time. The first time was 2 days ago. I almost got Mario Naufin canceled on stage. So hopefully this doesn't happen here. If anything, then you're going to drag me off the stage. Yet keep going on. But, okay, I did my research and everything. I make intros. But I feel like you don't need an intro anymore these days. If people don't know about you in this space, they should ask ChatGPT. Not who you are, but like why they're in this space and not know about you. But boss, back to your court. Do you want to make a proper intro?
I mean, I think, my name is Yad. I'm chairman of Animoca Brands. We're a company that's obviously deeply involved in Web3. I think most people in Web3 might know me, but it's kind of funny. I always bump into people who have never heard of us, right? And it just demonstrates how still, even within Web3, we are somewhat siloed, right? For instance, if you're in the NFT space, you will know who we are. But if you're basically in the Bitcoin space, maybe you have, maybe you haven't, right? It does happen. And actually, the other day, there's also a generational thing as well. So the other day, I actually was at an event with Brock, right? Brock Pierce. I think you all know who he is. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, there were some people coming up, to talk to me, and then I introduced them to Brock. And for people who are OGs in this space, you'd be like, Brock, I mean, he's been there since day one. Everyone knows who he is, right? Big respect. And they're like, so what do you do? So on one hand, it was surprising. On the other hand, it shows that as new people join the space, there is a little bit of an evolution as well. And I think the time when people do come into the space and I have to reintroduce myself is actually a good sign, because that means we have lots of new people who haven't been here before.
Right. So I did promise Hack Seasons that I would do one questions that no one else in this space could ask. This is like really personal, and this is a story coming from me. I have a friend back in Hong Kong, Australian Chinese, named Yet. So back from the banking day. Obviously, he's a banker. He owned the car plate Yet, Y-A-T Yet. And a few years ago, he told me that someone approached him to buy it off him. And with that amount of money, he speculated it's like either from you or like someone that knows you wanted, present it as a present to you.
Okay, so first of all, I do know that Tesla because it happens to also drive around the area where our old office was. So it always is around. I think it's a blue Tesla or something like that. And it has the big name, Yat. And I'm just like, okay, and everyone sends it to me and says, "Hey, I've seen your car," and I'm like, "This is not my car, right?" But just a little thing. It's not really a secret, but I don't drive, and I don't have a driver's license, and that's partially because of the way I grew up, right? Because in Austria we didn't have to drive cars, and nobody liked cars, and it was expensive. But the other thing is, in the future we all have self-driving cars anyway, so I kind of don't think I need to learn how to drive, unless you love driving, which I don't. And I think it's also dangerous if I drive because I'm on my phone, I want to do stuff, right? So I think I would be a hazard. So I don't have an interest in buying it, so it wasn't me.
Right. Okay. But if you have a chance, do you want that car plate?
No.
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 It doesn't strike me as a person that you want to go around and people know where about. Yeah.
No.
Okay.
And also, I think I think some people might like that, but that doesn't really speak to my character. Yeah, I'd rather people not know what is my car.
All right. Now that's actually tagged into my next questions, because like my friends, the other Yet, is like 20 years in banking, never actually been in the crypto space, but he knows about you. My wife knows about you, and she probably didn't know what I do day to day. So that means something. Your name is like go beyond the industry. Well, I don't know, at least
in some places maybe.
Yeah. But do you feel like the personal brand is like important in this space where, Yet is actually helping Animoca brands going around with the progression and development?
So, I mean, take crypto aside, and then I'll get to that.
Yep.
I don't think there is a business today where the personal brand of either the individuals, people, or leaders involved don't matter. So if you think about, for instance, 30, 40 years ago, for those of you who might have been around during that time, or right, corporations were the brand. Right? you might not have heard of IBM, or you might have heard of digital equipment, or maybe even Nike and so on. But like, how many people here know who the CEO of IBM is?
Exactly.
Right? And or like, even if I asked you who was the CEO of Coca-Cola, I mean, maybe some, right? That was that generation where everything was around the corporation and the image of the company, and the brand was built around that. But today, look at the top companies in the world. Everyone would typically know who the leader is because they center around that. So I don't think it's specifically related to crypto. If you want to build a brand as a business, there is a personal story and there's a mission for whoever the leader is that you know, right? I mean, in some ways, like, look in our industry, what is Binance without CZ? Like, CZ would not necessarily, he doesn't have to be CEO, but he's still the brand, right? Or if you think about like Pudgy Penguins, what is Pudgy Penguins without Luca? In a way, right? Even though he had acquired the business, he became the face of that, right? And I think this is the emergence of where companies traditionally were build themselves with a technology, a utility, and they're successful. But because of the way we're all connected, and this is really, really hypercharged in Web3, because of the way we're connected, we're all much more social. All of us become media companies, right? So you start off first as like in gaming. They start off with making games, and it's fun, and it's interesting, and you make revenue. But then they realize, hold on, I have an IP now. So that means I need to be a brand. Well, that means in order to be a brand, I need to be a media company. And so I would argue that every business today has to think in terms of being a media brand, which includes, your personality, your leadership, the individuals involved. Maybe the CEO is like your actor or your top director. It doesn't matter, but it's the same kind of sort of perspective I would take.
By the way, we didn't rehearse this, but this fit right into my next questions. And by the way, you can mention CC. I can't. My compliance team is really on the edge right now. I can do like first name basis. I can say Donald and Justin, and no one know who they are. So like all this like top most powerful influence, as you said, like every company is basically having all these like figureheads right now. Do you feel like these people with like a large following, like they can like kind of get away with the leeway of like saying silly things online, doing like having more mistake? For example, right? Again, first name basis. Like this guy's like been playing the online game Path of Excel 2, name's Elon. Doesn't work well, but like. He's obviously cheating, right? Have the whole team do it, but like he still have followers like telling everyone just like this is justifiable.
Yeah,
like,
I think so. To me, I think those are two different things, right? So one is what kind of brand are you building, and so clearly, and I think Elon is a great example of a personal brand that elevates everything else around that he touches, and I would also say it's the other stuff that he does, regardless of market prices. Right? So in other words, if Elon was only running Tesla, right, the old way of thinking was you should focus on one business, only one thing, and you should do it really, really well, right? But if Elon was only working on Tesla and nothing else, he wouldn't be the brand that he is.
Yeah, right.
The fact that he's doing SpaceX, the fact that he acquired Twitter to become X, the fact that he's involved in the government before and did, basically Doge and all that stuff, it's all that other stuff that builds that personality, that story, that make him both fascinating, loved and hated, depending who you talk to. And I think this sort of controversy also sells. So I would say then, in terms of the fact that he cheated, or so goes the claim, right? There's a point around, and especially in this environment, where you can say that controversy in and of itself creates attention. And our industry is absolutely no stranger to that, okay? And there's a lot of people in our industry who court controversy specifically because they want to drive attention. And that's because attention has become currency, particularly because of tokens. This is not so true in other industries because you don't need that. But when you're a public company, you need attention as well. And that's basically what drives a lot of it, which means that you will find, and this is not true for me, but you will find with different companies and founders that the founder may be a different personality on stage than he is as a person, because he or she might realize that they have a very different sort of audience that they want to appeal to, almost like an actor, right? That's not to say that they don't believe in what they do. It's just that they think of it as a way that they fulfill their mission. And I think you might find that, right? You might talk to people privately, and you see them go on stage, and they sound completely different. And that's, I think, just part of their story.
Right. Now, we talked a little bit of gaming, and we did back in Hong Kong a couple of months ago. I think there's two of the most exciting things happening that you mentioned is Switch 2 and GTA 6.
Yeah.
Now after 2 months, now we're here, and we see more of like a Switch. Mm-hmm. It feels like Nintendo just being Nintendo. They just like still heavily betting on, single-player, offline game, old IP, Mario Kart that we've been playing for the last 30 years. How does that feel? Like, is it a wrong signal to the Web3 gaming
No, not at
space?
all. So first of all, of course, we are one of Web3's biggest investors, and maybe for gaming, we might be the biggest one, right? You have, 570 portfolios, 165 plus are in gaming. So take that with a grain of salt, right? But our view is that gaming is going to be really, really big at the end of this year. Not from a utility standpoint, it's already big, but from basically what we expect token prices to do. Why is that? So just a little bit about Web3 gaming, where we are right now. As of last year, we had close to 7 million daily active users on blockchain games. That means it's the largest activity on-chain, right? Take away exchanges, on-chain it's the biggest activity. But token prices haven't done very well, right? In comparison to AI or meme coins or that type of stuff. And one of the things that we've come to realize, and I think many of you might already notice anyway, is that token prices in Web3 aren't simply reflections of the utility that happens inside Web3. In fact, there's much more reflection because of the speculative qualities around it of the broader market, right? So in other words, if AI is hot, AI tokens do well. Whether AI actually activity is very high is another factor, because maybe 20, 30% is utility and 70, 80% is actually the speculative quality of what happens. But it's not a bad thing, because they tell you about where the attention is at that moment in time. Like, when you look at market prices of commodities and of stocks, they actually inform you of where you should put your attention. They tell you, oh, okay, the oil price is this, or what are the factors around it? How should I allocate resources? Token prices do the same thing, but for attention, basically for media. So when you remember back in the day when gaming and metaverse tokens did really well in 21 and 22, what happened? Facebook renamed himself to Meta, and we had COVID, right?
Right.
And so why is it that gaming tokens have not done well? And this is why I think the other two comments are more relevant, haven't done so well. Now, most people don't know that gaming has been on the slight decline over the last 3 to 4 years. And I think most people think, oh, gaming, it's growing, and especially in this region. Because in this region, you have a young population. So if you're in Saudi and UAE, gaming is exploding. But if you're in the US, in Japan, in Europe, declining birth rate, right? People can now travel again post-COVID. Actually, the growth of gaming was flat. Now, that may not seem bad, because it's still 200 billion. It's still bigger than movies and music combined. But gaming hasn't repriced itself for over 10 years. So the cost of a game is exactly the same as it was over 10 years ago. Cheapest form of entertainment ever. What has happened? Well, the money printer just went like crazy, right? Milk is more expensive, salaries are more expensive. That's why the gaming industry has been laying off. Yeah. That's why the games that have been launching over the last 4 years haven't been that great, except maybe with Wukong and a couple ones. But generally speaking, they've been sequel after sequel because they didn't have the budgets. Market prices of gaming companies are actually not that high. I'll give you an example. So Roblox, our #1 gaming company in the world, 380 million active users, right? Really a social network. Market cap is maybe 40 or 50 billion. I mean, maybe 60. It's good, but Facebook is $1 trillion. One natural, like no comparison. If we take that audience and put it in a new TikTok, it'd be worth much more, right? Yeah. So the point is that gaming as a narrative has been negative for these reasons. When people are like, oh, it's declining, no investor capital, VCs aren't investing, all that stuff. So what's going to change this year? So you mentioned 2 of them, right? So Switch 2, this console hasn't launched in 8 years. When people buy a new console and the pre-sales have sold out, actually what happens is that on average you buy 12 to 15 new games as part of it. So gaming revenue will go up, attention will go up. That's the first part. The second thing is Mario Kart is going out physical copy $90.
I know.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, and while all the gamers are like, oh, it's expensive, I don't want to pay for it, the Nintendo Switch already pre-sold completely out, right? So clearly people are willing to pay for that
have to, yeah.
because it's cheaper than going to the movies 3 or 4 times, right? It's still the cheapest form of entertainment. Now, when they price it at $90, it gives license to every other game that's now charging 30 or 40 or 50 to go higher. Maybe they don't go 90, but they'll go to maybe 50 or 60 or 70. So again, more revenue, more cash flow, more growth, all that kind of stuff. So you'll see that factor. But the very single biggest thing is Grand Theft Auto, GTA 6.
Yep.
So I don't know, how many of you here play games? Okay, of course all of you have heard of GTA, right? How many of you have played GTA? Yeah, exactly, all the gamers have played GTA. Right, so the point being that it's the one thing that we're all looking for. And many gamers haven't bought a new console because it's an expensive investment, but they'll buy it for GTA. So that means that we're going to have, and also all the memes and everything. I think it's going to in the gaming industry, it's like the combination of Avengers plus like Lord of the Rings put together and launching it out, right? And they might even push the pricing to $100. So that will happen in September or October, right? So again, if you believe, as we do, that tokens in gaming are going to, so tokens are representations of what happens in the physical world in terms of market pricing, you're going to have an explosion of pricing happening in Web3 gaming precisely for that reason, right? Just like we had with AI before, or the metaverse, or with DeepIn or whatever that may be. Now, the other thing is that GTA allows for running of RP servers. Now, an RP server allows someone to run their own GTA 6 game inside the ecosystem. And that means that you can run crypto rails on it. And we expect lots of companies and individuals to start running crypto on GTA. Not because Take-Two is going to launch their own token, but because people will just run it themselves, right? So, maybe you'll have maybe you have a GTA.pump, I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen. But because the regulation in the US is also much more friendlier, the companies no longer have to take a directly negative attitude. So while you don't expect them to launch a token, they will not stop you either, because you're running your own server. So my expectation will be that by the end of the year, particularly the majors, so I think there's majors and value plays in the gaming sector will have a big revival by the end of the year. Certainly, we are investing with that thesis. Hopefully you're right. Ask me in 6 months.
Right. Now, so again, like everyone's played or know about GTA already, and it's like have a great in-game universe, right? So we haven't heard about this word for a while. So is metaverse still alive? Or do you still... Actually, I said it is metaverse dead, but like compliance changed it. Is metaverse still alive, or do you have like more like an evolved version of like a new version of it?
I mean, we call it open metaverse. Yeah. I think it's very much alive and well. Again, as I mentioned about the stats in Web3 gaming, the utility is high. People are making money in the space, particularly in places like Philippines and Indonesia. The only thing is that metaverse for people outside of our industry is not understood. Right? When you go to, if I go to my mom and say metaverse, she thinks goggles.
It's VR, right? Yeah.
And so I do think our industry has a little bit of a terminology crisis. And by the way, I don't think that's that different from how we talk about NFTs today. And later on, we just don't care about that as an NFT. It's just an asset that you have. It's like how many people say MP3s, right? We now just talk about listening to music on your phone. You don't actually talk about the fact of its digital format. So I think we have a little bit of that sort of terminology phase, but the metaverse is alive and well. Digital property rights is rising. More people are going on chain. It's still a small number, and again, I think gaming is very much a key driver in the growth of the open metaverse.
Right. Now, we obviously we talk at the backstage. We're like more like traditional hardcore gamers going into Web3 gamings. Do you feel like there's still like a misunderstanding? Like it's very short answers. It's like, is there like one factor there, like the Web3 gaming industry doesn't understand about the hardcore usual gamer, and then is there a factor where the hardcore usual gamer don't understand about Web3 gaming? Yeah.
So first, I think the problem is that in the West, and I think we need to distinguish between East and West, as in Asia and maybe the Western world, is the relationship that most people have with money. And the same people who dislike crypto are the same people who don't like Web3 games or NFTs. are the same people who don't like bankers and the same people who don't like money generally. Okay? So this is a crisis we have in the world today where people don't understand it. So for instance, in Dubai, maybe you don't like to play games,
but you like money.
But you have a healthy relationship talking about money. Everyone in this room is obviously quite happy to talk about money.
Yeah.
So if you're in a dinner table, you talk about investments, or maybe real estate, or you talk about art, and you talk about things of value, and it would not be considered rude. It'd be like, cool. And if someone makes a lot of money, good for you, okay? In Europe, can't talk about it. Okay, I grew up in Austria. If I talk about money, it's like, oh, okay. And if someone made a lot of money, what did you do wrong, right? So there's an entire narrative around how money is bad. And you see this in the US, in the politics. One camp is like, if you have money, you're a bad guy. Like Elon Musk is a billionaire, he must be evil, okay?
Right.
And the other side is, oh, you made money, you're successful, we should listen to you, that kind of stuff, right? So that's where we are. And so the gamers who don't like Web3 are the same gamers who have an uneasy relationship with money and who basically don't like capitalism. This is the reason why in Asia, NFTs and Web3 games are being adopted. All the major Korean and all the major Japanese and actually Chinese companies, if they could do it in China, they do it outside of China, like in Singapore, are all doing Web3 and NFTs inside games. Right? Some of the biggest ones, like Square Enix and Sega, Nexon, right? I think MapleStory, like these are big IPs. Whereas in Europe and in America, nobody's really touched it except Ubisoft. And every time Ubisoft says NFTs, their stock price goes down because people are like, we don't like it, right? So it's a signal to say, don't touch it, right? For the time being. So I think that's really, really the issue. But Web3 is a better business model for gaming. And so this is not that different from gaming in 2010-11. We were shifting from subscription to freemium, basically free-to-play.
Free-to-play.
Right? And free-to-play was a better business model. But everyone in the West hated it. They're like, oh, you're going to charge more, that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, it became the dominant model. Not because the user really wanted it in the West, because it was the better business model, because it drove more revenue and it was better for the companies. And we think the same thing will happen with Web3. The other thing, outside of financial literacy, I would add is, in gaming, it's very social. Right? So we have 4 categories of typically gamers in Bartle's taxonomy. We have the killers, the achievers, the adventurers, and the socials. Killers are roughly 1%. So these are the psychopaths who love to play games just to kill people. That can some kind of entertainment. You have the adventurers who play the game really just so they want to have an adventure and they want to explore. And then you have the achievers. They want to have like the badge, the skin. They want to be the top player, right?
Exactly.
Each of these are 10%. The rest are all social. So every game is social. If you ask your kids why you play Roblox, likely they'll say it's because my friends are playing it. But the achievers and the adventurers, they bring people into the game, right? They're the top 20% that bring their community in. They create the social. And in Web3, we have one more element now. It's called money. You can join the game to make money, but then you make friends. And then you stay in the ecosystem because of it, which is actually the basis of economies. Like how many people immigrated to America back in the day, my generation anyway, because of opportunity, right? You didn't go to America or to immigrate to a place, or even to Dubai, because you're here to make friends initially. You came here because there was opportunity and business and hope. But then you're here, and then you make friends, and maybe you meet a partner, and maybe you have children, and next thing you know, you're here, right? The Hong Kong story, which is also a place like that, is always about, I'm here for 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 20 years later, right? And that's a classic story, right? And this is the same is true for social. So it's just this added element. It's not the only element. Yeah.
Right. Now, because we didn't rehearse this, but talk about money. So Animoca brand's been huge on investment onto all different kind of projects. But do you feel because of our cycles, obviously we start off talking about a lot of Web3 gaming, but we have AI, then RWA, and then DPIN, design, everything. Do you feel like you kind of have the pressures into changing the directive, or you stick to your guns of what you actually believe in when you invest?
First of all, of the 573 investments, as I said, 165 plus are gaming, everything else in other areas. The ecosystem is young and developing, so it's very hard to just focus on one area because we need to build everything together. Our philosophy is that we're helping build the ecosystem. Even if one sector doesn't grow as well as the other, it still grows the entire space as a whole. And that's because in Web3, everything is permissionless. We don't think it's possible to have a monopoly in Web3 in the same way that you have in Web2. And I sort of want to maybe close it with this thought, right, which is when you build an ecosystem, a healthy ecosystem, you have to kind of reinvest. And you imagine what happened to Apple. Apple most recently just got this sort of judgment where they had to open up their payment platform because of monopolistic practices. And imagine if Apple took 1% of their cash, which is about $3 billion, and made a seed fund that would basically fund app stores, like small developers on the App Store. What would happen? Well, first of all, the App Store ecosystem would be better. More people would be building on Apple, and people would be happy to pay the 30%, because from their perspective, it's coming back into the ecosystem, right? And I think this is the thing about companies today. The top 10 companies in technology have $1 trillion of cash, 1 trillion, and is doing nothing except interest and use for acquisitions maybe, but barely. Again, if they took 1% of that and created a fund, it would be the biggest fund in the world for startups, and it would grow their ecosystem as a whole. And that's what we think is happening in Web3 anyway. So our philosophy isn't just picking a sector. Our philosophy is around growing the ecosystem as a whole. So we make money, sure, as an investor and as a builder, but what we do with our money is we invest back. Last year and a half, give or take, we made 123 investments, right? Now, if we were bigger, we might make 1,000 investments. We don't need all of them to win, but you grow the space as a result. And I think this is an attitude we have in Web3. How many people here, in Web3 have investments in other companies or individuals? Yeah, right? I mean, this is our space, right? And that's also the secret of Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is powerful not because technology is great there or you have great cell phone reception. It's a horrible place from a technology standpoint, but it's because everyone is investing in each other, right? It's a sport. And so I feel like that's the ethos of Web3, and that's what companies should build towards. And to your point, it's not about picking the winner in one category. Sure, we like gaming because we know it well, but it's basically building and supporting the ecosystem as a whole that will then basically literally have this effect of rising tide lifts all boats.
Right. I know they like queuing me, but like we'll wrap up like going back to like the topic, going personal, right? So I got the Animoca's brand's newsletter saying you guys set up an office here.
We'd have,
first office
yes.
in Dubai.
Yes.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Now the question is, well, we're from Hong Kong, right? Do you have plan to move over here, or will you move over here?
Well, I mean, okay. So first, Hong Kong is my home. It's where I pay my taxes, so I consider that my headquarters. But the reality is that, I mean, I think this is true for everyone, or many people here, is that we're all very mobile anyway. And one of the reasons that attract us into things like digital money and Bitcoin is that it's the kind of asset you can move everywhere around the world. I think we are, in a way, very nomadic, and we can choose to live anywhere we want in the world. And I think in Dubai, that's the case too. I mean, just come here over summer. They're probably all in Europe, right? So to me, it's not really, I think it's, you have a passport, but in some ways, I think we're citizens of the world anyway.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Like, we will see yet more in Dubai and maybe in Hong Kong and everywhere in the world. Give it up to Yet, please. Thank you.
Thank you.